Okay, we are here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia with a very special guest, Senator Robert Casey. Senator, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much. Great to be with you.
Great. So, Senator, the first thing I'd like to ask you about is the fate of the Build Back Better bill and what kind of impact this could have in Pennsylvania and maybe even Philadelphia as we look at the poverty situation we're dealing with here.
Yeah, it's a great question because I think one of the things that either we weren't able to do well in 2021 or we sometimes failed to do, and I say we, I mean Democratic senators. I won't speak to the House because they actually passed a bill, but we didn't really emphasize enough, I think, that what this bill would do to help people lift them up. And the big impact of this piece of legislation will be the lowering of costs for families that it will bring about. Lowering the cost of quality, affordable childcare, a huge issue in helping families and mostly women in the workforce get back to work. Lowering the cost of prescription drugs. My goodness, we've been talking about that for years. This bill would have that effect to lowering the cost of prescription drugs, especially for prescription medication like insulin, for example. It would lower the cost of home care by making home and community-based services more available for seniors, for people with disabilities, and making sure that enhancing the quality of that work by ensuring that the workforce isn't paid only $12 an hour. That's where we have a caregiving crisis in America. So many family members leaving one job, the job they're trained to do and the job they've had for years in many instances, leaving that job and taking an almost, in many cases, full-time job to take care of a loved one, a family member. So in the broad strokes would be that this legislation, Build Back Better, would help lower those costs. Now we have some work to do to get it back on track because we didn't meet our Christmas deadline. But I think we can. We're working on voting rights right now, so we have to keep other legislation kind of on a side, a parallel track. But I think we're going to get back to it soon and work to get it passed into law.
Okay, I'd like to bring in Denise Clay-Murray here on WPPM 106.5.
Good evening, Senator. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Denise.
And you were talking about the voting rights acts that are currently going through the House, and said the House passed their version on the day we're recording this, and the Senate is working on its version now. Where does that stand, especially in light of the announcements today that Senator Sinema and Manchin will not be voting to carve out a filibuster exception for this?
Yeah, we're at a point now in the Senate where after really now weeks, and even you could even say it's months of debate about this legislation. And I would break it down into two parts. One is the Freedom to Vote Act, which is a kind of a comprehensive voting rights bill that was negotiated by Democrats and Democrats in the House and the Senate. The House ended up passing it a while back before the year was over. But in the Senate, I think it's important to remind people that that bill has support from 50 Democrats. If you look at the votes we already took, we had several votes to advance the Freedom to Vote Act, but they were blocked by the advancement of the bill, I should say, was blocked by Republican senators. So you had 50 votes to advance it and have a debate, and 50 votes against having a debate. What we're headed into now is the not just the likelihood, but the certainty that preliminary step will be obviated by what the House did yesterday. So we're going to be able to actually debate the bill itself, not just debate whether we're going to, or not just vote on whether we're going to debate it. So that debate really has started, not formally, but it'll start in the next few days, and we're going to have a vote on that legislation so that every senator will be on record. The difficulty of getting to the next step where you're not just debating the bill, but you're actually having a pathway to get it passed into law involves a change in the Senate rules, and that's what we're working on right now as well. And I know there are at least 2 senators who have expressed opposition to a wholesale change in the rules, but we're still engaging with those senators to see if there isn't a pathway to at least, if you're not going to change the rules for every piece of legislation, figure out a way to change the rules so we can at least get voting rights passed into law. Because when you look at both the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis voting rights bill, it allows us not just to protect the right to vote in a way we've done so in the past, but really to have national standards on voting that are very consistent, frankly, with what we have in Pennsylvania. We had Act 77 passed with lots of Republican votes in the State General Assembly, the State House and State Senate. And when Republicans and Democrats came together in 2019 to pass that bill, to allow early voting, to allow mail-in voting, to allow counties to set up drop boxes so that if you're 90 years old, you don't have to travel halfway across a big rural county. You can put your ballot in a drop box, or you can vote by mail and put it in the mail. That was a great advancement for Pennsylvania. And guess what? It worked. We know it from the numbers. We had the highest turnout for a presidential election in about at least 60 years, if not 100 years in Pennsylvania. And that was during a pandemic. Everyone was saying, oh my goodness, voter turnout's going to go way down. Guess what? More than 800,000 more people voted for president in Pennsylvania in 2020 than in 2016. And that happened even though there was a pandemic, even though people were predicting the turnout would go way down. That happened because Republicans and Democrats agreed to have different pathways to vote early, to vote by mail. And if anything, we should continue that in Pennsylvania and make sure that every state in the country and every has those opportunities. Every voter has a chance to vote in the way that they want. Why would we go back to the old days when you have to vote only on one day a year in a general election and only between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m.? That makes no sense in the busy modern world that people live in today when they have difficult jobs. And so I think we can advance the ball and get this done.
Okay, Larry, did you have another question?
Yes, Senator. I have one last thing I'd like to ask you about. I was watching the hearing, the Help Committee hearing on Tuesday, and
yes.
There's an amazing contrast between you, your calmness, and the deliberate way that you conduct yourself, and some of your colleagues. As a United States Senator, and then us in the media, when we hear things from officials that are just plain wrong and harmful, how can we, all of us, work to overcome that and make sure that people are getting accurate, correct information that could be life-saving in some cases?
Well, you're right, Larry. That hearing was a demonstration of that. I think it was interesting that I think Senator Romney, a Republican senator, Republican of the state of Utah, who ran, as you know, we all know, for president in 2012 on the Republican side, Senator Romney used the word performance or performative, I forget which version of the word, talking about some of his own colleagues, at least 2 senators, who were attacking Dr. Fauci and not attacking him accurately with facts. I think if you watch that whole hearing, you saw a couple of things. You saw both senators on both sides of the aisle asking tough questions and demanding answers. I was asking the head of the CDC for her answers to some questions from things she said last week. So you had both parties doing that, but every once in a while you have senators who want to do a little performance instead of kind of put a spotlight on the truth. The good news is that's less frequent in those kinds of hearings. Most senators are trying to get accurate information about COVID-19 and testing and the variants and the science and where we're headed as a nation. And I'd say the last bit of good news is we hope that that this pandemic will be behind us soon if we all keep rolling up our sleeves and working together to put it behind us. And at the same time, whether it's on COVID or any other issue, the American people have more resources now to get accurate information. That's the irony. Because we see the proliferation of inaccurate information, lies about the election, lies in information that's not factual. The only good news there is there's plenty of other places to go to get accurate information. You know, I'm old enough to remember, both of you are probably much younger than I am. But in the old days, if you wanted to get information about a topic, guess what you had to do? You had to go to a bookshelf and pull off an encyclopedia. My 4 daughters don't even know what those are, because you can get instantaneous retrieval of information from the federal government, from all kinds of sources around the world. And I just urge people that to go to trusted sources of information. And often that means a local newspaper or a radio station or a television station to get information, in addition to what you can just get on, by doing your own research. But I think it's important to differentiate between a trusted source and a source that has a bias that colors the view that they have in terms of providing information.
Well, Senator Casey, we can't thank you enough for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for the time. We're grateful.
Thank you, sir.